The airport lounge buzzed, but all I heard was Sarah's easy laugh with Frank Abbott, his hand lingering on her lower back. He then turned, a smirk playing on his lips, and handed me the car keys. "Thanks for the ride, Hanson," he said, his eyes drilling into mine. "I'll take it from here." My throat tightened. Dale Hanson watched Sarah Miller disappear through the security checkpoint. She turned once, gave a quick wave, then melted into the steady stream of travelers. He felt the familiar, quiet ache that always settled in when she left for her bi-weekly trip to Des Moines. 2 nights. It was part of the routine. He'd kissed her goodbye in the car, the scent of her shampoo faint on her hair, a quick peck on the cheek. Nothing out of the ordinary. He drove the 15 miles back to the house, the empty passenger seat feeling wider than usual. The morning light was sharp, cutting through the bare branches of the oak trees lining their street. He had planned to clean out the garage, maybe head to Miller's Hardware for some new paint rollers. Small, manageable task for a Saturday morning alone. The quiet of the house when he stepped inside was a heavy thing, a physical presence. He dropped his keys on the entry table, untied his boots, and walked into the kitchen. The coffee maker blinked. He poured himself a cup, black, then moved to the small office nook in the corner of their living room. He powered on the desktop computer, the hum, a familiar sound. While the machine booted, he took another swallow of coffee. He always checked his personal email first, scanned the headlines, then moved on to anything that might have come through for Sarah's work account if she'd forgotten to log off. It was a habit, a small courtesy. He clicked the icon for the shared work email client, waiting for the inbox to load. His eyes scanned the list, mostly office memos and project updates. Then he saw it, a draft message in the outbox folder, unsent. The subject line read, "Your suggestion." The sender was Sarah Miller. The recipient was Frank Abbott. Dale's brow furrowed. He hadn't seen her typing any long emails this morning. He clicked it open. The message was from Frank, not Sarah. It appeared to be a reply that had somehow ended up in Sarah's drafts, or maybe she had opened it and accidentally saved it there. Dale started to scroll. The words on the screen were stark, illuminated by the cold glow of the monitor. "That black bra with the teal accents," it read, "is exactly what I'm picturing. You wear it well. Can't wait to see you in it again on Monday. For me." Dale's gut twisted. A cold dread spread through him, sharp and sudden. He reread the sentence, his eyes tracing each word slowly, as if by dissecting them he could change their meaning. That black bra with the teal accents. You wear it well. For me. He felt a tremor start in his hands, then move up his arms. The coffee cup on the desk rattled softly. He pushed back from the chair, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. He stood, then practically ran to their bedroom, his breath catching in his chest. His hands were shaking as he pulled open Sarah's dresser drawer, the one where she kept her lingerie. He rummaged through the silk and lace, his fingers fumbling. He knew the bra. He'd seen it. It was a recent purchase, something she'd worn only a few times. His eyes scanned the drawer, then another, then a third. It wasn't there. A wave of nausea washed over him, hot and bitter. The room spun for a moment, then settled into a sickening clarity. He leaned against the dresser, his knuckles white. The obvious, brutal truth hit him with the force of a physical blow. Sarah was having an affair. The words echoed in his head, hollow and horrifying. "No, no, it can't be," he whispered, the sound thin and reedy in the quiet house. He tried to rationalize, to deny. Maybe it was an inside joke, a misunderstanding. But the words, "for me," lingered like a poison. He pushed away from the dresser, a sudden cold resolve hardening his features. He needed to know. He walked back to the computer, his movements stiff, deliberate. He wouldn't let this sit, not now. He knew Sarah had logged out of her work account, but sometimes if the internet connection was flaky, a session might not fully terminate. He manipulated the modem, cycling the power. He held his breath, watching the lights flicker. When they settled, he tried logging into her work email again. To his surprise, it worked. The system, for whatever reason, still recognized her credentials. He navigated to her inbox, his gaze sharp, hunting. He saw the usual folders: inbox, sent, drafts. Then, tucked away at the very bottom, almost hidden by an extra scroll, was a folder labeled simply personal. his heart hammered against his ribs. He hovered the mouse cursor over it for a long moment, a battle raging internally. Then, without another thought, he clicked. A flood of messages appeared dating back months, all from Frank Abbott, all intimately titled, Monday night, thinking of you, missing this. The sheer volume was crushing. He clicked on the first one, a long email from 6 months ago. It detailed a dinner, a hotel, the intimate specifics of their first encounter. It laid bare their long-standing affair, raw and undeniable. Dale sat there, the screen casting a pale, sickly light on his stunned, numb face. He didn't move. He didn't blink. The initial shock began to recede, replaced by a slow, simmering rage. It built within him, cold and steady, like a Midwestern winter settling in for the long haul. The morning stretched, then bled into afternoon, and still, I sat before the screen. Each click, each opened email was a fresh wound, dulling the last. The hidden folder held months of their correspondence, a meticulous archive of my shattered life. I read every single one, my eyes burning, a dryness in my throat that no amount of coffee could quench. The words blurred sometimes, but the meaning never did. It was all there. The affair wasn't new. It had started shortly after Sarah's promotion, coinciding with the increase in her biweekly trips to Des Moines. I remembered her enthusiasm, the way she spoke of career advancement, the pride I felt. Now, the dates on the emails matched up perfectly with her supposed work travel. Every business trip had been a cover, a carefully constructed lie. There were references to specific flights, hotel room numbers, late-night dinners, and quiet mornings. The casualness of their deception was a fresh sting. Another successful project Frank had written once, followed by details of a weekend spent together in St. Louis. Sarah's reply, just as casual, confirming a future rendezvous. They spoke of me in passing, a nuisance, a hurdle. I saw Frank Abbott's tactics clearly now. His emails were often laced with subtle flattery, suggestions veiled as professional advice, gradually shifting into personal longing. Sarah, in turn, seemed to thrive on it, her replies growing more intimate, more eager. She wasn't an unwilling participant. She was an active, complicit partner. The realization hollowed me out further. It wasn't just a violation of my marriage, but a betrayal of my entire life. Everything I thought I knew about her, about us. My sense of judgment, my trust, my very reality felt warped. Memories started to shift, acquiring a sinister tint. Sarah's recent distance, attributed to work stress. The new clothes she'd bought, attributing them to needing a fresher look for the presentations. Her late-night calls, always closing a deal or talking to clients. Her sudden interest in certain types of music or films, things Frank had mentioned in the emails. All those small, seemingly innocent details now coalesced into a grotesque tapestry of lies. My own blind spots, my willingness to believe, felt like a fool's crown. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Mark, my friend from the bowling league. "Hey, Dale, still on for that fishing trip this afternoon?" he asked, his voice easy. I cleared my throat, forcing a semblance of normalcy. "Nah, Mark, can't make it," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "Feeling a bit under the weather. Got a nasty bug." Mark hesitated. "You sounded. Everything all right?" "Just a bug," I repeated, a lie so flimsy it almost choked me. "Catch you next week." I hung up before he could press further, needing the silence, the solitude to process it. I started to document everything. Methodically, I printed every single email, the paper spitting out of the printer like cold, hard evidence. I arranged them by date, creating a timeline. I made notes, cross-referencing flights, hotel stays, specific phrases. My hands, which had trembled earlier, were now steady, almost robotic. A part of me screamed to pick up the phone, to call her, to unleash the fury building inside. But a colder, more calculating part of my mind, a side I hadn't known existed, urged patience. Confrontation now would be emotional, messy. It wouldn't achieve anything beyond giving her an advantage. I needed irrefutable proof, something beyond emails she could deny, dismiss as misinterpretations. Something tangible. Then a memory surfaced. Sarah excitedly telling me about her first big client meeting in Des Moines, had mentioned staying at the Grand Central Hotel. "It's gorgeous, Dale," she'd said. "They treat us like royalty." I remembered the name, a detail that now burned with renewed significance. The Grand Central. That would be a start. I opened a new browser tab, searching for Divorce Lawyer Iowa. The words looked alien on the screen, like something from another life. The fees, the complexities, the raw statistics, it all hit me. The house, the years we'd spent building our home, the dreams we'd share for retirement, for our future, all of it now dissolving into legal jargon and financial spreadsheets. I felt like a stranger looking at a stranger's life. And then Frank Abbott, the man I'd always found vaguely irritating, too polished, too self-assured. I disliked him on instinct, never having a concrete reason. Now, that instinct was validated, twisted into a fresh surge of white-hot fury. He hadn't just taken my wife, he'd taken my peace, my future, my very identity. I closed the laptop. The quiet hum of the machine filled the room, a contrast to the storm brewing within me. Sarah would be back Sunday night. 2 more days. I decided then I would act normal, I would smile, I would listen. I would let her walk right back into this house, into our life, and straight into the trap I was now meticulously setting. Sarah returned home late Sunday afternoon, her usual travel bag slung over her shoulder. She walked into the kitchen, found me making dinner, and smiled. "Hey, stranger," she said, her voice light. She leaned in, kissed my cheek, and then pressed her body against my back for a moment. It felt cold, rehearsed. I knew she was feigning affection, unaware of the chasm that had opened between us. I murmured a response, keeping my voice steady, stirring the pot on the stove. Every gesture, every word from her was now tainted. Her easy smile, her questions about my weekend, the way she ran a hand through her hair, all of it, in my eyes, screamed of deceit. I struggled to maintain my composure. The bitterness was a constant taste in my mouth, acrid and sharp. It felt like acid working its way through my insides. But I held it together. I nodded. I offered simple answers. I even managed to laugh at some anecdote about her flight. The effort was exhausting, a performance demanding every ounce of my will. I saw the relief in her eyes, the assumption that everything was normal. That only fueled the fire within me. The next morning I made a call. Donnie Bates, a private investigator I'd found through a discreet online search. His office was a small, nondescript room above a hardware store on the edge of town. He was a quiet man with tired eyes and a handshake that felt like dry leather. I laid out the situation, omitting the more emotional details, focusing on the facts, the emails, the specific hotel. He listened, nodded occasionally, scribbled notes. "It'll take time," he said, his voice flat. "But if they're doing what you say, we'll get it." Donnie started his surveillance the following week. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived at my P.O. box. Inside were photographs. Sarah and Frank exiting the Grand Central Hotel in Des Moines, early morning. Sarah's arm linked through his, a relaxed smile on her face. Another shot of them sharing a quiet dinner. Heads close, hands almost touching. The anticipation of these images had been a cold comfort, but seeing them, concrete and undeniable, still hit me with a visceral blow. My breath caught. My vision blurred for a moment. "Damn her to hell," I muttered, the words barely audible. The rage, which had been simmering, surged. I had already scheduled a consultation with Mr. Jenkins, a divorce lawyer known for his no-nonsense approach. His office was on the top floor of a downtown building overlooking the river. He was a portly man with a neatly trimmed beard and sharp, intelligent eyes. I handed him the photos and the printed emails. He looked through them, his expression unreadable. "Solid evidence," he said, tapping a finger on a picture of Sarah and Frank. "Leverage." We discussed asset division, the house, the cars, our savings. He asked about potential custody, and I felt a fresh pang of grief for the children we never had. "The goal," Mr. Jenkins advised, "is to gather maximum leverage before confrontation. The more you have, the stronger your position. You don't want to tip your hand too early." I started to consider more than just divorce. I wanted to make Frank Abbott and Sarah pay. Not just financially, but in a way that would truly hurt them. I began to discreetly move funds, slowly, carefully, so as not to trigger any immediate flags. A portion of my salary, small transfers to a new separate account, protecting my share of our joint assets. It felt cold, calculated, but necessary. That weekend, I drove to my parents' farm an hour north. Martha, my mother, was tending her hydrangeas when I pulled up. George, my father, was mending a fence. I told them everything, the words tasting like ash. Martha gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Her heartbreak mirrored mine, a raw, open wound. "Oh, Dale," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Are you sure it can't be?" George said nothing at first, his face a mask of stone. He just nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on some distant point. Later, Martha urged caution. "You're still young. You need a reliable woman. Don't ruin your life over this." But when George caught my eye, his held a silent understanding of the anger that simmered beneath my quiet facade. He just gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. I began to formulate a multi-pronged plan. It wasn't enough to simply divorce Sarah. I needed to hit them where it mattered most. I knew Frank Abbott was ambitious, always talking about making senior partner. He had a powerful wife, Linda. I remembered overhearing Sarah mention her once, how Frank was always careful to keep his home life separate from work. That detail, insignificant at the time, now felt like a key. I would strike at their careers, their reputations, their carefully constructed lives. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about retribution. For weeks, I continued the charade. I played the unwitting husband, enduring Sarah's manufactured affection. Her kisses felt like a performance, her hugs a tight embrace of deceit. Each touch was a test of my resolve, a fresh insult. I cooked dinner, listened to her talk about her day, even offered advice on work problems. Inside, I was a coiled spring, every interaction tightening the tension. But outwardly, I remained calm, distant, a man simply going about his quiet life. Through my own work, managing regional accounts for a supply company, I had a network of contacts across different industries. I used these connections, subtly, without raising suspicion, to gather information about Frank Abbott's professional life. A casual question to a colleague at a Rotary lunch, an innocent inquiry during a golf game. Pieces of information began to surface. Frank was heavily involved in a high-stakes legal case, something with the governor's office, carrying significant weight for his firm. His ambition to make senior partner wasn't just talk. It was a current, tangible goal, almost within reach. I started to strategically place small, anonymous tips. Nothing overt, nothing that could be traced back to me. Just enough to plant seeds of doubt. An email to the firm's anonymous ethics hotline, hinting at potential conflicts of interest or inflated expense reports. A carefully worded whisper to a journalist friend I knew vaguely about a partner at a prominent firm juggling too many balls. Each tip was a pebble dropped into a still pond, hoping to create ripples. Donnie Bates was thorough. He provided more data, confirming my suspicions. Frank's expense reports for his business trips frequently coincided with Sarah's travel schedule. Discrepancies appeared, charges for single hotel rooms that should have been double, dinners for two billed as client entertainment. The financial impropriety was becoming clear. To keep my communications secure, I created a separate, anonymous email address, using it only to correspond with Donnie and Mr. Jenkins. This was a war, and I was arming myself. One evening, Sarah came home, a slight frown on her face. "Things are weird at work," she said, tossing her keys onto the counter. "There are some rumors going around about Frank, something about his expenses, and someone mentioned his late nights." She shrugged, pouring herself a glass of water. "Just office politics, I guess." I looked up from the newspaper, feigning disinterest. "Probably," I said, my voice flat. "Folks always looking for something to talk about." I saw her accept my casual dismissal, her guard remaining down. It was almost too easy. The decision to leverage Linda Abbott, Frank's wife, had been percolating in my mind. She was a prominent figure in the community, active in several charities, a pillar of local society. Public reputation, I knew, was everything to people like her. It was time for a more direct approach. I found out about a silent auction and fundraiser she was chairing, for a local animal shelter. I bought tickets. The event was held at the country club, a sea of polite smiles and hushed conversations. I spotted Linda across the room, elegant in a navy dress, talking to the mayor's wife. I waited, moving through the crowd, making small talk until the perfect moment arose. She was alone for a minute, looking at a painting. I approached, offering a polite smile. "Linda, isn't it?" I said, extending my hand. "Dale Hansen. I don't believe we've formally met, but I've heard wonderful things about your work for the shelter." She returned my smile, a flicker of polite surprise in her eyes. "Oh, yes. Frank's mentioned you, I think." "Nice to meet you, Dale." We made small talk about the auction, the community, then I casually steered the conversation. "Frank's quite the busy man these days," I said, a slight pause. "My wife, Sarah, works with him. She says he's always on the go. Des Moines, St. Louis. You must hardly see him." I kept my tone light, almost sympathetic. "All those late nights at the office, I imagine." Linda's smile tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Yes," she said, her voice a little cooler. "He's very dedicated to his work." I nodded as if accepting this. "Must be hard," I continued, "with his ambition for senior partner. So much pressure." I left it there, a seed planted. Her initial dismissiveness seemed to waver. I watched her discreetly for the rest of the evening. Her eyes, every now and then, would drift towards the exit, a subtle shift in her demeanor. The seed had taken root. The formal confrontation was fast approaching. I knew it would be brutal, but it was necessary. I began to practice my words, not out loud, but in my head. I wanted to deliver them with precision, not just raw emotion. I needed to be calm, factual, devastating. The time for pretense was almost over. The last week before Sarah's next bi-weekly trip felt like an eternity. I set the stage meticulously. I arranged for my parents, Martha and George, and to stay with me that weekend, ostensibly for a quiet visit, but in truth for emotional support and as a subtle presence, a witness if needed. They arrived Saturday morning, their faces showing a mixture of concern and quiet resolve. My mother, Martha, immediately started puttering in the kitchen, a way of comforting herself. My father, George, sat in his usual armchair, his gaze steady on me. I spent hours in the quiet of the spare bedroom assembling the final folder. It was thick now, heavy with the weight of shattered trust. Every printed email, every photograph from Donnie Bates, every financial document highlighting Frank's expense report discrepancies. The story of their betrayal laid bare, page by damning page. It felt solid, irrefutable. Mid-morning on Sunday, my phone rang. It was Sarah, her voice seemingly carefree, a slight echo on the line from the Capitol. "Hey," she chirped, "just finished up a meeting with Frank. We're about to grab some dinner before my flight." She talked about a new restaurant, a clever presentation Frank had given. My blood ran cold, but my voice remained level. "Sounds productive," I managed. "Safe flight home." As I hung up, a cold fury settled over me. "Enjoy it while it lasts, Sarah," I thought, the words a silent promise. The real surprise came an hour later. My phone buzzed again, an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. "Dale, this is Linda Abbott." Her voice was tight, strained, but laced with a palpable rage. "We met at the fundraiser." My carefully planted seeds had borne fruit. She didn't mince words. "I've done my own digging, Dale. Frank has been having an offer, and I believe it's with your wife." My breath hitched, not in surprise, but in grim satisfaction. "I've also discovered he's been using firm funds to subsidize their trips, travel expenses, hotel rooms, all hidden within client billing." Linda's voice rose, sharp with indignation. "He used my name, Dale, to cover his tracks. He lied to me. He lied to his partners. This isn't just about our marriage. This is about his professional integrity, his career, his very future." She paused, her breathing ragged. "I want to expose him. All of it. Will you cooperate?" I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. Not just divorce, but justice. Severe consequences for both of them. "Yes," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. "Absolutely." The very next day, a discreet, anonymous package found its way to the senior partners at Frank Abbott's law firm. Inside were copies of Donnie Bates's reports, highlighting the egregious discrepancies in Frank's expense reports, cross-referenced with Sarah's travel schedule. The information was precise, undeniable. Later that afternoon, through a contact I still maintained, I learned that the partners had initiated an internal investigation into Frank's conduct. The wheels of retribution were turning. Sarah's flight landed late that Sunday evening. I heard her car pull into the driveway, the familiar crunch of tires on gravel. She walked in looking tired, her suit jacket slung over her arm. "Rough flight," she mumbled, dropping her bag by the door. She expected the usual routine, a quick hug, maybe a question about dinner, but I greeted her with a steely silence. The air in the small entry hall was thick, heavy with unspoken tension, like a coming storm. My parents were quietly seated in the living room, Martha knitting, George reading the newspaper, their presence a silent, unwavering testament. Sarah sensed the shift immediately. Her tired eyes narrowed, a flicker of unease replacing her exhaustion. "What's wrong, Dale?" she asked, her voice nervous, her gaze darting between me and my parents. "What's going on?" I didn't answer her directly. Instead, I walked to the coffee table and slowly, deliberately, placed the thick evidence folder squarely in the center. The sound it made was small but absolute. "Everything," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, gesturing towards the folder. "We need to talk. As you consider the unraveling of a life, stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold." The folder lay on the coffee table, a mute, damning presence. Sarah's eyes, wet with a dawning horror, darted from my face to the beige cover. My parents sat quietly on the couch, their gazes fixed, unwavering. "What is this, Dale?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I picked up the folder and opened it, pulling out the first stack of printed emails. "These are from your work account, Sarah. To Frank Abbott. They detail your affair. The dates, the places, the intimate details." I laid them out one by one, watching her face pale. She tried to deny it, a frantic shake of her head. "No, Dale, that's a misunderstanding. Office jokes, maybe. You don't understand work humor." I then placed the photographs beside the emails. Sarah and Frank, leaving the Grand Central Hotel, Sarah's arm in his, a dinner photo though intimate. "Is this also office humor, Sarah? A misunderstanding? Did you often spend early mornings leaving hotels with your boss, sharing quiet dinners? For work?" Her denial crumbled. The color drained from her face, replaced by a mottled red. Her eyes welled up, tears beginning to stream. "It was a mistake, Dale," she cried, her voice cracking. "A terrible mistake. I swear I was confused. He pressured me. It happened. Please forgive me." She reached for my hand, but I pulled it back, unwilling to be touched. I remained cold, unmoved by her tears. They felt hollow, a performance for an audience of one. "Mistakes don't last for months, Sarah," I stated, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Mistakes don't involve elaborate mows, hidden emails, and financial fraud to cover them up." I let that last part hang in the air. "I've filed for divorce," I continued, the words feeling heavy yet necessary. "Citing infidelity and financial impropriety on your part, using firm funds to cover your trips with Frank." Sarah gasped, a choked sound. She stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. She hadn't expected this level of preparation, this meticulous dismantling of her deception. She became hysterical, her pleas turning into a desperate, frantic babble. "No, Dale, you can't. We can work this out. Please. I'll do anything. I'll quit my job. I'll stop seeing him. Please, let's talk about it." She tried to negotiate, her voice rising in pitch, but I shut her down. "My terms are non-negotiable, Sarah," I said, my gaze steady. "I've spoken with Mr. Jenkins. He'll be in touch with your lawyer. You have 24 hours to pack your essential belongings and leave this house. My parents are here as witnesses if you choose to make a scene." My mother, Martha, shifted uncomfortably, but my father, George, gave a slight nod, a silent reinforcement of my words. Sarah, defeated, stumbled to her feet. She grabbed her phone, her hands shaking, and retreated to the bedroom. I heard her frantic whispers, then a frustrated cry. She had called Frank Abbott. I knew what she was discovering. He had been suspended from the firm, his career all hanging by a thread. Linda Abbott had already moved forward with her own divorce proceedings, swift and unforgiving. Frank, caught in the web of his own lies and financial malfeasance, was facing an ethics investigation that would likely end his career. News of the scandal spread through our small Midwestern town like wildfire. Whispers turned to open gossip. The details, exaggerated or accurate, traveled fast. I felt a grim satisfaction, a cold sense of justice being served. But beneath it all, there was a profound emptiness, a cavern where my life with Sarah had once been. The victory felt hollow, bought at the cost of everything I had once believed in. Over the next few days, the difficult process of telling friends and family began. I kept my voice calm, factual, letting the evidence speak for itself. My friends Mark, Jim, and Randy rallied around me. "Can't believe she'd do something like that, Dale," Mark said, shaking his head. "She seems so nice." Jim added, "Frank Abbott always seemed like a snake, but Sarah? That's just cold." Randy just clapped me on the shoulder, offering silent support. Their condemnation of Sarah's actions, while validating, did little to fill the void. I started the painful process of dividing assets. The house, our joint savings, the car, each item, once a symbol of our shared future, now felt like a relic of a failed marriage, a reminder of what had been lost. The divorce proceedings officially began, dragging us both into a legal maze that was as contentious as it was emotionally draining. The initial papers were served, and from that point on, it felt like my life was under a microscope. Every detail picked apart, every shared memory tainted. Sarah, now financially vulnerable and professionally disgraced, fought hard. She wanted more than I was willing to give, clinging to every last asset, every dollar, as if her life depended on it. Her lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, but the evidence was too strong. Mr. Jenkins, my lawyer, was methodical. He presented the overwhelming evidence of Sarah's infidelity and her complicity in Frank Abbott's financial impropriety. The emails, the photographs, the cross-referenced expense reports, each piece was a nail in her coffin. The judge, a stern woman with an unblinking gaze, absorbed it all without a hint of emotion. News from Frank Abbott's front trickled in through Mr. Jenkins. His career was in ruins. The internal investigation at his firm led to his immediate disbarment. He also faced potential criminal charges for fraud, something Linda Abbott was determined to pursue. She was a force, ensuring Frank lost everything he had worked for, leaving him publicly shamed and financially ruined. His carefully constructed life had imploded. Sarah's attempts to countersue for emotional distress were swiftly dismissed by the court. Her claims of being a victim of coercion by Frank dissolved under the weight of her own written words and actions detailed in the evidence. The judge saw through it, seeing only a willing participant. In the end, the ruling was heavily in my favor. The judge acknowledged Sarah's role in the affair and Frank's professional misconduct, which had directly impacted our shared finances. I was awarded the house, a significant portion of our joint assets, and minimal spousal support for a brief period, just enough time for her to find her footing. Sarah was left with little. Her professional reputation was destroyed, making finding new employment difficult in our small, interconnected industry. She became reliant on her family, forced to move back to her childhood home outside of town. The small town whispers and stares became a constant, unwelcome reminder of her fall from grace. I'd see her sometimes, at the grocery store or the gas station, her eyes downcast, avoiding my gaze. The community, always quick to judge, had made its decision. I sold some of our shared investments, diversifying my portfolio, using the money to secure my future. It felt like rebuilding from the ashes, slowly, deliberately. I avoided all contact with Sarah, communicating only through our lawyers, a cold, formal barrier between us. It was the only way I could manage. Despite the legal victory, the emotional toll on me was immense. The house felt empty, too quiet. The silence echoed with the absence of a life that was supposed to be. I sometimes looked out the window at the familiar street, at the neighbors mowing their lawns, and thought, it ain't really winning, is it? The triumph felt hollow, a heavy cloak draped over a profound sense of loss. I found solace in my work, in the routine and the predictable nature of supply chain logistics. My family, Martha and George, were unwavering. My friends, Mark, Jim, and Randy, often stopped by, offering quiet companionship, a beer on the porch, a game of cards. They didn't offer advice, they just listened, and that was enough. One evening, Mark mentioned a support group at the community center for men who had experienced infidelity. I hesitated, but the emptiness still lingered, a dull ache that wouldn't quite fade. I needed a path to healing, beyond just legal vindication. I went. It was a room full of strangers, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel so alone. Months passed, stretching into almost a year. The divorce was finalized, the legal papers tucked away in a drawer, binding and official. The immediate raw pain began to recede, settling into a dull ache. The dust finally started to settle. Sarah left town, the public scorn, the whispers in the grocery store aisles, the professional blacklisting. It was all too much for her. She moved away to a different state, seeking anonymity, a fresh start. I heard she eventually found a low-level job, far from the career she'd once boasted about. Frank Abbott, too, disappeared from public life. His once promising career was utterly destroyed, his reputation in tatters. I rarely heard his name mentioned, and when I did, it was usually in hushed tones, a cautionary tale. I started to reclaim my home, not just legally, but emotionally. I removed all the reminders of Sarah and our shared past, her clothes, her trinkets, the photographs of us together, all packed away, donated, or discreetly discarded. The house felt lighter, cleaner, infused with my own presence again. I rearranged furniture, painted the living room a new calming shade of blue. It was a tangible act of taking back what was mine. I took up new hobbies, woodworking mostly. There was something profoundly peaceful in the tangible act of creation, shaping raw wood into something useful, something beautiful. The rhythmic sanding, the scent of sawdust, the focus required, it quieted my mind. My relationships with Mark, Jim, and Randy deepened. Their unwavering loyalty, their simple presence, was a comfort I hadn't realized I needed so much. We continued our weekly bowling league, our fishing trips, our quiet evenings on the porch. Eventually, I started dating again, tentatively. The support group had opened my eyes to others navigating similar paths of heartache, betrayal, and rebuilding. It was awkward at first, feeling out the landscape of single life in my 40s. The ghost of Sarah's betrayal lingered, making trust a difficult, heavy thing. I found myself scrutinizing every word, every gesture, searching for hidden meanings. Then, at a local bookstore's author event, I met Anna. She was a librarian, kind and pragmatic, with a quiet wit and eyes that held genuine warmth. We talked for a long time about books, about our lives. There was a gentle companionship that felt natural, unforced. Hesitantly, over several months, I shared my story with her, laying bare the raw wounds, the anger, the foolishness I had felt. She listened with empathy, not judgment, her hand often resting on mine. She understood that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about integrating it. I continued attending therapy, working through the layers of anger, the deep pain, and the lingering sense of foolishness that had once consumed me. It was a slow, arduous process, but I learned to articulate my feelings, to process them rather than burying them. I also reconnected with old friends I drifted from, expanding my social circle, bringing new perspectives and laughter into my life. One quiet evening, as I finished sanding a small wooden box, a realization washed over me. True revenge wasn't in Frank's downfall or Sarah's public shame. It wasn't in their broken lives. It was in my own healing, in the quiet strength I had found. In the future, I was meticulously, patiently rebuilding. Their misery wasn't my salvation. My peace was. I focused on my work, bringing a new level of dedication and clarity to my tasks. My efforts were recognized. I earned a promotion within my firm, a testament to my renewed focus and capabilities. I still carried the scars, indelible marks of a life irrevocably changed, but the open wounds had begun to close, leaving behind not just a survivor, but a stronger, more resilient man. 2 years after the divorce, Dale's life had transformed. The house, once a constant reminder of betrayal, was sold, replaced by a smaller, cozier place on the edge of town that truly felt his own. His relationship with Anna had blossomed, a steady, loving partnership built on quiet understanding. They talked about moving in together, about building a future, cautiously. He had learned to trust again, the raw fear of betrayal replaced by the understanding that not everyone was Sarah. Occasional whispers reached him about Sarah, working odd keys, living a transient life in a different state, far from her former ambition. Frank Abbott was a forgotten name in legal circles, his once brilliant career now a cautionary tale. Dale felt no joy in their misfortunes, only a quiet sense of closure. He reflected on the price paid by everyone involved, himself included, understanding the cost of deceit. His family, once broken by the betrayal, was now stronger, more connected. He dedicated time to community service, finding a purpose beyond his own life, helping others in quiet, unassuming ways. He understood that morality wasn't about vengeance, but about finding integrity within himself. One quiet evening, watching the sunset over the fields, the sky bleeding into hues of orange and purple, Dale realized he was truly at peace. The past was a chapter closed definitively. The horizon, vast and open before him, held the promise of a quiet, honest future. He smiled, a genuine smile, for the first time in a very long time.